She thought it was just a test, a little girl, a harmless setup, and a locked safe. But what the CEO didn't expect was to be the one left speechless. What began as a simple act of suspicion unraveled into a story of dignity, redemption, and a single dad's quiet brilliance that would change her world forever. Pause. Soft instrumental music rises. This isn't just a story about a little girl who outsmarted a billionaire. It's about how kindness, when overlooked, can rewrite the rules of power. Before we begin, if you believe in stories that restore faith in people, consider subscribing. Not every hero wears a suit. Some wear janitor aprons and carry the world in their silence. Now, let's begin. The security alarm didn't scream. It whispered. A soft ping lit up the glass-paneled corridor of the 32nd floor, casting a faint glow over the luxurious silence of Atlas Tech's executive wing. At this hour, 2:13 a.m., only shadows should have walked here. But tonight, the silence was broken by the sound of small, bare feet brushing against the cold marble floor. 8-year-old Ellie stood on her toes, reaching, ever so gently, toward the polished chrome handle of the slightly ajar vault. Her tiny gloved hands hesitated before touching it, as if part of her already knew this was the moment everything could change. Behind her, the moonlight shimmered through the panoramic windows, illuminating her white cotton dress like a ghost of innocence. She wasn't supposed to be here, but she had followed the numbers, the blinking red dots, the inconsistent temperature fluctuations on the tablet she secretly borrowed, and something told her, no, screamed at her, that something inside this vault would explain why her father kept waking in the middle of the night, whispering, "This isn't just about cleaning floors anymore." She reached out, and then the voice pierced the stillness like a dagger. "Step away from that vault." Ellie froze. The soft click of heels echoed across the polished floor, steady, deliberate. A tall woman emerged from the darkness, the dim corridor lighting tracing the sharp lines of her navy silk suit. Vivienne Leclerc, 42, billionaire, CEO, untouchable. But tonight, she was fully alert, wide awake, watching. Behind her, 2 private security guards emerged from the shadows. One yanked Ellie back just as she touched the edge of the vault. The other turned on a blinding overhead light, throwing the room into sterile brightness. Ellie didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply looked up at Vivienne with eyes full of calm, ancient intelligence, eyes far older than her years. Vivienne's jaw clenched. What kind of father uses his daughter to steal from me? At that exact moment, the elevator doors burst open. Jordan Hale stormed into the room. His janitor apron was stained with cleaning chemicals, and his long, dark hair clung to his temples from the stairwell sprint. The moment he saw Ellie in the grip of the guards, something primal shifted in his stance. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He simply raised his hand. "Let her go," he said, voice low, controlled. Vivienne stepped forward, eyes locked on his. "I knew you were hiding something. That veteran act, the quiet routine. It was all a mask. I should have listened to my gut." "You're making a mistake," Jordan said evenly. His voice didn't tremble, but his hands did. "Ellie doesn't lie. She doesn't steal. She was trying to understand something, probably better than your entire board ever could." Vivienne laughed coldly. "You think I'm going to let this pass? You've been inside the core systems, in the labs, cleaning, watching. You knew about the vault access, and you sent her because no one suspects a child." Jordan shook his head. "You're not listening." "No," Vivienne snapped. "You're done here." She turned to her security team. "Escort them out. Permanently." The guards grabbed Jordan's arms. Ellie tried to run to him but was held back. As they dragged him toward the elevator, Jordan looked Vivienne in the eyes one last time. "You're wrong about us," he said, voice barely more than a whisper. "And one day, it'll break you." The elevator doors closed with a heavy clang. Silence returned, but it wasn't the same. Vivienne stood alone in her glass office, heart pounding in a rhythm that felt too loud for the room. She crossed slowly to the security monitor embedded in her desk and tapped back the surveillance footage from 5 minutes ago. She watched Ellie walk in. No fear, no hesitation, no sign of deception. She watched the girl look at the digital humidity readings on the vault screen. She watched her tap the panel with the curiosity of someone not trying to steal, but trying to fix. Vivienne's breath caught. She rewound again, slowed it. Ellie wasn't breaking in. She was triangulating temperature surges, noting inconsistencies in the biometric failsafe system, the very bug Vivienne's R&D couldn't explain for 6 months. She saw the moment Ellie noticed the microscopic flicker in the vault's left corner, a vulnerability that could have compromised 18 million in IP, something even her own engineers had missed. Vivienne sat down, hard. She hit pause on the footage. The screen froze on Ellie's face, her eyes locked in concentration, mouth forming the soft whisper. "Found it." Vivienne didn't move. For a long time she just stared. Then slowly, like a dam cracking, tears began to spill silently down her cheeks. She wiped one away, then stopped. Let the next fall freely. For the first time in 10 years, she felt something she couldn't explain. Shame. Not because she caught a thief, but because she'd banished a miracle, and she didn't even know the girl's name. The night was cold, but the silence was colder. Jordan Hale sat at the edge of a rusted fold-out bed in a rented one-bedroom flat tucked behind a forgotten alley in Southside. The kind of place people only passed by, but never looked into. A leaky faucet dripped in the background. The walls were stained with memories that didn't belong to them. But inside, it was home. Or at least the closest thing they had. Across from him, Ellie sat cross-legged on a threadbare rug, sketching furiously with a dull pencil. Her hair fell over one eye as she leaned closer to her notebook, tongue peeking out in concentration. She was drawing a clock. Not just any clock. The digital vault timer she had seen in the CEO's office. The numbers. The blinking light. The way it ticked just half a second slower than the internal systems should have. She had noticed it, memorized it, and now was trying to recreate it. "Are you sure you want to draw that?" Jordan asked softly. Ellie nodded without looking up. "I want to send it to her. Maybe she didn't mean to be so mean. Maybe she's just sad. Or scared." Jordan exhaled, letting the weight of the day press into his chest. His hands were still scraped from being pushed into the sidewalk earlier. The night guard hadn't been gentle. He walked to the kitchen corner, if it could be called that, and poured hot water over 2 cups of instant noodles, the kind that smelled like salt, hope, and regret all at once. He brought the cups to the center of the room and sat cross-legged beside Ellie. "Dinner's served, Chef Ellie," he said with a tired smile. She grinned. "Exquisite cuisine, sir." They ate in silence for a few minutes. The steam from the noodles mingled with the warmth of their presence. No bitterness, no resentment, just dignity. Quiet, unshaken dignity. Then Ellie spoke, softly. "Dad? Yeah. Why don't people see how smart you are, or how kind?" Jordan stirred his noodles slowly. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to, because I don't live to be seen, he said. I live to be known. By you. Ellie blinked. Known? He turned to her now. One day, the world might clap for you, or it might turn its back. That doesn't change who you are, or who I am. I don't need the world to know I saved lives. I just need you to know I never stopped trying to do the right thing. That's enough for me. Ellie studied him with the kind of silence that only came from deep understanding. Then she crawled closer and rested her head on his arm. A flickering bulb buzzed overhead. Outside, a siren wailed far away, just another note in the soundtrack of forgotten lives. But inside this small room, a different kind of story lived. 6 years earlier, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. The night had been blackened by smoke and sand. Fire streaked across the sky like falling stars, set on killing. Screams pierced the darkness. Men, women, children. Staff Sergeant Jordan Hale moved like instinct itself, shielding 2 civilians behind a crumbling wall of a school that no longer stood. His radio crackled with orders he knew were wrong. The extraction point was clear, but the street was full of civilians, an unplanned gathering of refugees, lost and wandering. The command was brutal. Do not engage, do not delay. Secure target. Leave civilians behind. But Jordan had never been good at obeying injustice. He disobeyed. He stayed. Alone. He fought off 2 insurgents with a broken rifle and a jagged piece of rebar. He carried a mother and her unconscious son across 3 blocks of open fire. By the time support returned, he had saved 11 lives. But headlines didn't follow. Promotions didn't come. Instead, a quiet discharge under the guise of disciplinary defiance. He never said a word, not even when they erased his name from the mission logs, not even when they handed him a janitor's mop instead of a medal. Present day. Southside apartment. Ellie curled up on the sofa, her drawing resting on her chest. The clock was nearly perfect. Jordan watched her sleep, chin tucked to shoulder, breathing even and soft. He reached into the box under his cot, a military storage box that bore scratches and sand from a different life. From it, he pulled out a single medal, one he was never supposed to keep. A survivor had mailed it to him years later, anonymously. On the back, "You saved us, even if they never say it." He held it for a moment, then slid it gently beside Ellie's drawing. She stirred. "Night, Daddy." He leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Good night, kiddo." He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights, so bright yet so blind. The world didn't see him, but it would see her. And maybe that would be enough. The silence of the penthouse was not peace. It was punishment. Vivian Lockhart stood barefoot in the middle of her glass-walled living room, the skyline of Manhattan gleaming around her like a mocking audience. Her silk robe hung loose at the shoulders, coffee untouched on the marble counter, steam long since died. For the 3rd night in a row, she hadn't slept. Couldn't. Her eyes were red, not from tears, but from watching, re-watching, security footage, over and over and over again. In the golden light of her office, the small girl had entered quietly, as if pulled by invisible strings of wonder. Her steps weren't stealthy. They were innocent. She wasn't searching. She was studying. Vivienne watched as Ellie climbed onto the executive leather chair, her small fingers gently touching the slightly open vault built into the wall. The little girl never even glanced at the cash or the confidential folders inside. Instead, she pulled out a pencil, her own from her pocket, and began to draw. The clock, the numbers, the blinking red dot. Then Ellie gently closed the vault and placed something on the glass desk, a folded napkin from the company kitchen. Vivienne paused the video at the frame where Ellie stood there, arms at her sides, head slightly tilted. Almost like she pitied the woman behind the desk. Vivienne's hand trembled as she reached for the napkin, now kept beside her on the granite counter. It had been crumpled in the trash when she found it hours later, after the guards had dragged the child out. Unfolding it slowly, she read again what was scrawled in crooked, childish handwriting. It was open. I thought maybe you forgot. Ellie. That was all. No theft, no mischief, No malice. Just a little girl who noticed an open vault and wanted to help. And Vivian had called security. She had shamed her father. She had dragged them out like criminals in the middle of the night. A sound escaped her throat, something between a sob and a snarl. She grabbed her phone and threw it across the room. It shattered against the steel leg of the sofa. The screen went black. Vivian didn't flinch. She turned, breath sharp, and her gaze fell on the framed photograph hanging near her hallway. The one of her on the trading floor of Wall Street, arms raised in triumph, confetti raining down. That day had made headlines. Youngest female CEO in Fortune 100 history. Now, it made her sick. She stormed toward the frame, yanked it off the wall, and hurled it to the floor. The glass cracked in jagged streaks, slicing across her triumphant smile like poetic vengeance. She stood over it, chest heaving. Who had she become? Later that night, the city glowed beneath her feet, a river of light that no longer touched her. She wandered to her desk, sat heavily, and opened her personal journal. A habit long abandoned, back when vulnerability was still permissible. Her pen hovered, then slowly began to move. This morning, I called a child a thief, but she was the only honest person in the room. She paused, exhaled shakily. I built my empire on perfection, precision, power. But in doing so, I lost something. Maybe everything. Because tonight, I saw myself through the eyes of an 8-year-old, and I hated what she saw. Tears welled but didn't fall. Vivian didn't cry. She shattered internally, silently, like frost splitting under sunlight. She stood again and walked to the wall of windows, staring down at the city. A voice echoed in her head, not Ellie's, but her own, from years ago, lashing out at her mother during her final hospital days. I'll never be weak like you. I'll never forgive like you. And her mother had smiled, frail and soft. Then one day, you'll hurt someone you can't fix. Vivian clutched the edge of the glass so tightly her knuckles went white. That day had come. In the boardroom the next morning, executives talked over each other. Memos flew. Her assistant whispered about market dips. A partner complained about a broken system. Vivienne said nothing. She sat at the head of the table, staring out the window, arms folded. Finally, someone asked, "Ma'am, what do we do about the security incident? The one with the janitor's daughter?" She turned slowly, her voice colder than marble. There was no incident. But she didn't steal. We did. We stole something from her, her dignity, her safety. The room went quiet. Vivienne rose. "We'll find them. I don't care how long it takes or what it costs." "Find them for what purpose?" someone asked. Vivienne looked at them, eyes distant, voice steady. "To apologize." That night, alone again, Vivienne stood barefoot in the same penthouse. But something had shifted. Her hair was pulled back, clean. Her eyes were tired, but clear. She looked down at Ellie's note again. It was open. "I thought maybe you forgot." Vivienne whispered aloud to no one. "I did forget. I forgot everything that mattered." She turned toward the cracked photograph of herself on Wall Street, then walked away from it without picking it up. For the first time in years, she felt human again. The city moved like it always had, indifferent, vast, faceless. But Vivian Lockhart was no longer its queen. She was just a woman searching for someone she'd never bothered to truly see. It began with a call to HR. "I need the janitor's file. The one from last week. His name is Jordan." The silence on the other end lasted a fraction too long. "Ma'am, I'm not sure who you mean." "Don't insult me," Vivian snapped, but her voice lacked the venom it once carried. "He worked the night shift. His daughter came into my office. Her name is Ellie." Another pause. "We don't have that on record." Vivian narrowed her eyes. Are you telling me a man who swept our floors for 3 months just vanished from our system? There's no file, no employee ID, not even a payroll number. She stood motionless, stunned. Then, softly, almost to herself. He was that hidden? And so began the unraveling. Day 2. Vivian hired 2 private investigators, discreet, top of the line, ex-FBI. They came back with 3 words she hadn't expected to hear again in her life. Classified military clearance. Jordan wasn't just a janitor. He'd once worked in military intelligence, a ghost in uniform. Former Marine, special clearance. That's why you can't trace him, the younger investigator explained. His name was buried years ago. And the girl? Vivian asked. Nothing. No current school enrollment. No medical records. It's like she never existed. Vivian leaned back in her chair, her thoughts colliding like trains in her skull. They disappeared. Because of me. Day 4. She began driving. Her black Range Rover, usually reserved for airport runs and investor meetings, now traced back roads and neighborhoods where Manhattan's spotlight didn't shine. She started with veterans' shelters. The first one was tucked behind an old train station in Queens. She walked in, heels muted by worn tile, pearls at odds with peeling paint. A volunteer eyed her with suspicion. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for a man. His name is Jordan. He's a former Marine. Tall, brown hair. Quiet. He has a daughter." The woman crossed her arms. "We don't share that kind of information." Vivian reached into her bag, but not for a checkbook. Instead, she pulled out a worn napkin, Ellie's drawing of the clock. "He didn't take anything from me," Vivian whispered. "I took everything from them. I need to make it right." There was a long silence. Then the woman sighed, gently softening. "Sorry, haven't seen them here. But try the VA in the Bronx. Sometimes the ghosts go there." Day 7. Vivian hadn't touched makeup in days. Her hair stayed tied back, plain, deliberate. Every school, every shelter, every church basement became a place of prayer. Each time she saw a little girl with brown curls, she paused. Each time she heard a Marine call sign muttered between vets, she froze. She carried Ellie's drawing in her coat pocket like a compass, each fold more worn, each crease more sacred. At a small community school in Brooklyn, she found herself staring through a chain-link fence at a group of children playing tag. One girl, white dress, chestnut hair, sharp, curious eyes, made her breath catch. She stood there for a long time, watching. A teacher approached. "Ma'am, can I help you?" Vivienne smiled faintly. "I thought I recognized someone." "You a parent?" Her throat tightened. "No. I'm looking for someone I failed." The teacher studied her. "If you tell me the name—" "I don't have it," Vivian said quickly. "Not the real one. I think he changed it." "Well, what do you remember about them?" Vivian closed her eyes, and for the first time let herself feel. He was tall, maybe 35, wore an old military jacket like it was his second skin, never raised his voice. But when he spoke, it was like you wanted to be better, just to deserve the way he looked at you. She took a breath. And his daughter. She had this way of seeing through people, not judging, not fearing, just seeing. Like she already forgave the world for being broken. The teacher blinked, moved. "That sounds like someone I wish I'd met." Vivian looked away, eyes glassy. "Me too." Day 10. A homeless man sleeping outside a coffee shop muttered as she passed. "People only find what they're willing to admit they lost." Vivian stopped cold. "What did you say?" The man looked up, grinning toothlessly. "You're looking for ghosts, lady. But you gotta bleed a little before ghosts come back." She crouched down, something soft cracking in her chest. "I'm bleeding," she whispered. "Every night." He nodded slowly. then pointed toward a faded mural down the block. "Try that church. The priest there listens better than most." Day 12. Inside a dusty chapel with cracked wooden pews, she sat for hours. No phone, no guards, no name. Just her. A nun eventually approached. "You've been here since morning." Vivienne nodded. "Are you waiting for someone?" She hesitated. Then, for the first time, told the truth aloud. "I'm waiting for forgiveness." "Whose?" Vivienne's voice cracked. "A man I misjudged. And a little girl I destroyed with my words. I don't know where they are. I don't know if they'll ever want to see me again." The nun sat beside her, warm and still. "You can't control if they forgive you," she said gently. "But you can choose to live in a way that honors them. Every day." Vivienne pressed her fingers to her lips. Her voice trembled. "I just want a second chance." Later that evening. As the sun disappeared behind the buildings, Vivienne stood at a crosswalk. A boy passed her, holding his father's hand. Vivienne's eyes locked on the man. Tall, strong posture, brown hair. Her heart stuttered. But when the man turned, it wasn't Jordan. Still, she lingered. Because maybe tomorrow it would be. And until that day came, she would keep walking, keep asking, keep hoping. Because now, Vivienne Lockhart wasn't looking for redemption. She was chasing it. The ballroom shimmered with sterile elegance. Gold-trimmed walls, neatly dressed rows of education executives, and a stage adorned with banners that read, "Tomorrow's Minds, Today's Mission." Vivienne Lockhart stood at the back, arms crossed, eyes dull. She wasn't here for redemption. She was here because her board had insisted that she reconnect with grassroots innovation for PR purposes. Another string of polished lies in her life's tight corporate bow. And now, we're honored to present this year's winner of the Youth Art for Hope competition, the announcer called from the stage. This student's submission stunned the judges, not just for its beauty, but for the story behind it. Vivienne barely looked up until the canvas appeared on the giant projection screen behind the speaker. A clock, drawn with aching precision, the hour and minute hand slightly off-center, the gears exposed like veins, delicate lines suggesting movement and time. Waiting, and in the bottom corner, scrawled in a child's hand, Ellie M. Vivienne's breath caught in her throat. Her knees nearly buckled. It was the same clock, same tilt, same gentle strokes. But this time, the gears were colored. The background bore faint glimmers of gold, and the tiny handwritten note just below the title read, "Because maybe you forgot to notice the time when you were hurting." Vivienne bolted. She pushed past attendees, heels clicking on marble, found the event organizer's table, and leaned in, out of breath. "That sketch. Ellie M. I need to know where she submitted it from. Now." The young woman blinked. I'm not sure if we're allowed to share." Vivienne threw a business card down, the logo of her billion-dollar company catching the light. "This isn't about business," she said, voice low, trembling. "It's about making something right." The submission came from a non-profit-sponsored school in Mendocino County, over 500 miles away. A quiet place. Rural. Mostly children of veterans. Vivienne didn't wait for a plane. She drove. For the first time in years, she drove herself. No chauffeur, no blacked-out SUV. Just her, the open road, and a hollow ache expanding with every mile. As the city gave way to redwoods and winding coastlines, Vivienne's mind spun with questions. Why M? Why now? Had Ellie forgiven her, or was this some kind of message? She didn't know, but she needed to find out. It was nearly dawn when she pulled into the gravel lot of Chestnut Ridge Learning Center. A converted barn stood at the center, painted robin's egg blue, surrounded by flower beds, and an American flag swaying in the misty morning breeze. She sat in the car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing unsteady, heart pounding like she was about to walk into combat. Then she stepped out. The air smelled of pine and earth, and something gentler. She found the front office unlocked, an older woman setting out coffee. "Excuse me," Vivian said, her voice rough from the night's silence. "Is there a student named Ellie M. enrolled here?" The woman looked her up and down, designer coat dusty, eyes swollen from crying, hair tangled from the drive. "You a relative?" the woman asked gently. Vivienne hesitated, then shook her head. "No, just someone who owes her everything." They were in the art room. Jordan stood near the window, arms crossed, gaze distant, as morning light poured through stained glass cutouts taped to the frame. His once pristine military jacket looked faded now, worn at the shoulders. But he still stood like a Marine, tall, composed, vigilant. And Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by crayons and watercolor sets, her little white shoes kicked off to one side. She was drawing again. Vivienne stood in the doorway, afraid to move. Ellie looked up first. Her expression didn't shift. No surprise, no anger, just a quiet acknowledgement. "I thought it might be you," she said simply. Jordan turned, eyes sharpening. A long pause filled the room, years of silence compressed into a breath. Vivian's lips trembled. She took a step forward but stopped, afraid her presence would shatter something fragile. I saw your sketch," she managed. "In Sacramento. It spoke." Ellie blinked slowly. "What did it say?" Vivian's throat tightened. "That I was wrong," she whispered. "So deeply wrong." Jordan's face remained unreadable. Vivian turned to him. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, voice cracking. "But I need you to know. I've looked for you every day since that night. Every damn day." She reached into her coat and pulled out the folded napkin. Ellie's original clock drawing, creased, faded, but lovingly preserved. "I carried this like it was my compass." Ellie stood, walked over, and studied her face. Not as a child looks at an adult, but as a soul looks at another soul. And then, quietly, with a whisper of wonder, she asked, "Do you see clearer now?" Vivienne's lips parted. No sound came. Her knees gave way. And there, in a room full of chalk dust and innocence, the once untouchable CEO of a billion-dollar empire collapsed to the floor. Not in disgrace, not in shame, but in humility. Tears streamed down her face. No drama, no speeches, just silence and sobs. Ellie reached for her hand. "I missed you," she said softly. Jordan, still by the window, watched them, shoulders tense, heart warring between pain and protection. Vivienne looked up at him. "I never asked your story," she said. "But your daughter told it anyway. Every stroke she drew, every word she didn't say. She taught me who you were." Jordan didn't speak, but his stance softened, his jaw unclenched. And for the first time since the night they were cast out, they stood together in the same light. The silence that followed their reunion lingered like morning fog, not cold, but thick with unsaid truths. Vivian hadn't left the school grounds. She stayed in a modest hotel down the road, surrounded by redwoods and silence, her phone untouched for the first time in years. She didn't rush anything. She waited. And 2 days later, Jordan invited her for tea. No press, no witnesses, just a wooden picnic table under a maple tree outside the school, the sun slipping through the rustling leaves. Vivienne sat across from him, a chipped ceramic mug in her hands. She looked smaller without her high heels, stripped of her armor of designer clothes and corporate polish. Her gaze wandered to Ellie playing hopscotch in the distance, her laughter light and clear. Jordan followed her eyes. She's safe here, he said, and she's learning what matters. Vivian nodded. I can see that. There was a pause. Then she folded her hands and drew a long breath. Jordan, she began softly, I'm here not just to apologize, but to offer something tangible. I want to invite you back, officially. You'd have a senior position, strategy, R&D, even leadership if you want it. Anything. You belong with us. I was blind to that before. He didn't flinch, didn't smile either. Instead, he looked into her eyes with the calm of someone who had already made peace with his answer. No. Vivian blinked. I don't mean to offend. You didn't, he said gently. But I need to say this clearly, and I need you to hear it. He leaned forward, voice low and steady. Not angry, not bitter, just resolute. I didn't come here to be rescued, Vivian. We're not a project for you to fix, so you can feel whole again. She opened her mouth, but he held up a hand. I appreciate your apology, and I see you're trying. But I don't need a title or a spotlight or a redemption arc. He glanced over at Ellie again, who had now stopped and was drawing something in the dirt with a stick. I need my daughter to know, he continued, that dignity isn't something you barter back with favors. It's something you defend, even when no one's watching. Vivian looked down at the mug, now cold in her hands. I understand, she whispered. But he wasn't finished. I want her to grow up believing we are more than the opportunities we're given, or denied. That we are more than the pity of powerful people trying to rewrite the past. Vivian's lips quivered. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know, he said. But meaning well isn't enough. It never was. She nodded slowly, her eyes misting over. For a moment, she looked nothing like the feared CEO of Lockhart Dynamics. She looked like a woman who had finally stopped running from herself. Jordan reached for the thermos between them and poured her another cup. The steam curled upward like a fragile truce. I forgive you, he said, but forgiveness isn't a job offer. She laughed, soft, broken. You're the only person who's ever told me no without trying to make me feel small. Jordan tilted his head. Because a no with dignity isn't about you. It's about truth. Vivian was quiet. Then, you know, she said slowly, when I built the company, I thought I had to become steel. Ruthless. I told myself that if I bled too much, they'd devour me. Jordan looked out toward the trees. And did they? She smiled through the sadness. Eventually. But I beat them to it. I devoured myself first. A long silence followed. Ellie skipped toward them, dirt smudged on her knees, holding up a small leaf. Look, she said proudly. This one has 2 colors. Jordan took the leaf gently. Vivian smiled at her. Ellie, may I ask you something? The girl nodded. Do you think people can change? Ellie thought for a moment, then answered with a wisdom far beyond her years. I think they can remember who they were. That's kind of like changing. Vivian blinked, stunned, then quietly murmured, That's the truest thing I've heard in my entire life. Jordan smiled, just slightly. The first flicker of warmth in days. Ellie ran off again, chasing a squirrel. Vivienne stood up, brushing dust from her coat. I won't bother you again, she said, but I want you to know. What you said today, what you are, it's changed me. Jordan nodded. Then it wasn't wasted. She extended a hand. He looked at it, then clasped it, firm and respectful. And for the first time since Wall Street, Vivian Lockhart bowed her head. Not out of defeat, but in reverence. As she walked away down the gravel path, Ellie watched from behind a tree, her big brown eyes scanning Vivian's retreating form. She tugged at Jordan's sleeve. Dad, are you sad? Jordan thought for a long moment, then picked her up in his arms. "No, honey," he said. "I'm just grateful. Some victories don't look like medals. They look like holding on to who you are." The boardroom at Lockhart Dynamics had never heard silence like this. Vivian stood at the front, not in a power suit, but in soft navy blue. No heels, no flash, only clarity. Behind her on the screen glowed a single sentence in white. "Not everyone who changes the world wants their name on the building." She took a breath. "This initiative is called the Invisible Perspective," she said. "It's a scholarship and mentorship program for the children of veterans, janitors, cafeteria workers, night guards, and every other person this system forgets while it shines the light on the few." The room murmured, but Vivian continued, unshaken. "It's for the ones who show up early, leave late, and teach their kids to be kind even when no one is watching." One board member finally raised a brow. "And who's the architect behind this?" Vivienne smiled faintly. "He prefers to remain unseen." What no one knew was that the architect had already been walking these halls again, quietly, unnoticed, like always. Jordan. No badge, no parking space, no paycheck, just wisdom in whispers. He sat in the back corners of small team meetings, observing. He advised interns and managers anonymously through a secure internal system, always signing off as JM. He never stepped inside Vivian's office. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They were building something more important than reconciliation. They were building trust. The invisible perspective grew fast. In a matter of months, local veteran centers were connected to internship pipelines. Lockhart janitors began leading monthly workshops on real-world budgeting and resilience. Cafeteria cooks taught nutrition to young coding recruits. Maintenance teams mentored high schoolers in mechanical engineering. The company's image shifted, but it wasn't a PR campaign. It was a soul transplant, and at the center of its beating heart was a child. Ellie. At first, it began as a small feature on the company's internal newsletter. A hand-drawn sketch of a vintage wall clock, signed in the corner. Ellie M., age 9. Underneath was a note. "My daddy said time is the only thing you can never clean up once you waste it. So I like drawing it before it disappears." The staff was stunned. Comments poured in. Someone turned it into a desktop wallpaper. Another made t-shirts. Vivian watched from her office, quiet tears lining her eyes. They asked if Ellie would agree to a short feature in the company's new Humans of Lockhart series. Jordan hesitated, then agreed. On one condition: no last names, no interviews, no questions about her father. And so, a photo was taken. Ellie sat on a low wooden stool in front of a blank canvas. Her hair was tied back, smudges of charcoal on her cheeks. She was laughing at something the photographer had said. Pure, radiant joy. The headline read, "The girl who drew time, now drawing futures." It went viral. From that moment, Ellie became an unintentional symbol, not of pity, not of overcoming hardship, but of perspective. She reminded people that innocence wasn't weakness, that observation wasn't passivity, that sometimes the ones who say the least see the most. Schools began inviting her artwork into classrooms. Teachers used her clock metaphor in lessons on empathy. One university requested to include her drawing in a social ethics textbook. Jordan watched quietly from the sidelines. He never stepped into the spotlight. Vivienne never tried to pull him in again. But one evening, long after the offices had emptied out, she walked to the rooftop garden where she often found solitude. And he was there, sitting cross-legged, looking at the skyline. She didn't ask how he got in. He didn't ask why she came up. They just sat. Stars above, traffic murmuring far below. "I don't want to change the world anymore," Vivian said softly. I want to stop breaking it. Jordan didn't look at her, but his voice held a kind of gentleness that couldn't be faked. You're not breaking it, he said. You're listening to the parts that already cracked and helping them speak. A pause. Ellie told me yesterday, he continued, that you're her second favorite adult. Vivian smiled. Second? She said you still have some growing to do. They both laughed, and for the first time, there was no power dynamic between them. No apology, no atonement, no resentment. Just two people. One who had fallen from grace. One who had chosen silence over vengeance. And both were finally building something neither money nor legacy could buy. Understanding. Back in the school, Ellie was drawing again. This time, not a clock. It was a tree. Half of it barren, broken, gnarled. The other half blooming, branches stretching wide, roots intertwining with people. At the bottom, in a small scribble, she had written, "Sometimes, trees just need time to remember they can grow again." The storm didn't come with thunder. It came quietly, through whispers in mahogany corridors and under-the-table dossiers slipped across polished glass. Dale Rowan had been biding his time. A senior board member with a smile too wide and a handshake too cold, he had never approved of the invisible perspective. Not because he didn't understand the idea, he understood it too well. Empowering the overlooked meant disturbing the comfortable. And Dale was very, very comfortable. One evening, he invited Vivian to his private lounge on the 37th floor, the kind of place where oil paintings watched every move, and the air smelled of old scotch and quiet betrayal. "I respect what you're trying to do, Vivian," Dale said, pouring 2 glasses without waiting for her acceptance. "But it's time we start thinking like adults again." She didn't sit. He continued, sliding a slim black folder across the marble table. "Read it. Carefully, before you let your emotions burn this company to the ground." Vivian opened the folder with a reluctant grace. Inside were surveillance stills, photocopies of military records, and a forged reprimand letter stamped with a red seal. It alleged Jordan had been dishonorably discharged for misconduct. It included altered footage, grainy and dark, of a man resembling Jordan, involved in a scuffle at an overseas checkpoint. And at the bottom, a transcript of a supposed military tribunal. Vivian didn't speak. "You're smart, Vivian," Dale said, swirling his drink. "Too smart to be played by a janitor with a tragic backstory. He disappeared for a reason. People like him, they're not misunderstood. They're liabilities." She closed the folder slowly. Her hands didn't tremble, but her chest did. "I'll look into it," she said, voice unreadable. "That's all I ask," Dale smiled, as if he'd just handed her the truth wrapped in velvet. That night, Vivian couldn't sleep. The clock glowed 3:17 a.m. on her bedroom wall, but her mind replayed Dale's voice on loop. A janitor is still a janitor. She stared at her ceiling, doubt creeping in like a slow fog. Had she been naive? Was Jordan just a master manipulator playing the long game? The man had no records, no online presence before 2017. Ellie's birth certificate had no mother listed. Their rental history was a ghost trail. It was as if they'd stepped out of nowhere and into her world, like a scripted redemption arc. And wasn't that too convenient? By dawn, she'd made a decision. She needed answers, but not from Dale, and not from anyone in a suit. She went to the only place she thought truth might still breathe. An old Navy veterans bar 2 hours outside the city. The place smelled of tobacco, worn leather, and stories no one told sober. She stood out, immaculate, powerful, designer heels echoing on concrete, but no one cared. She approached the bar. "I'm looking for someone who served in the 112th Marine Recon, Okinawa Division, 2009 to 2014. A grizzled man in a wheelchair glanced up. His beard was like moss on a rusted statue. Why? I need to know if a man named Jordan Miller was dishonorably discharged. The man didn't answer. Instead, he rolled back, disappeared into a side room, and returned minutes later with a photo. 7 soldiers, mud-covered, smiling despite bloodied uniforms. One of them, Jordan, kneeling, holding a wounded child in his arms. "That kid," the man rasped, pointing at the photo, "would have bled out if it weren't for Miller. Carried her through Sniper Alley with a busted rib, took a bullet in the shoulder, kept moving. That's not a janitor. That's a goddamn hero." Vivian's eyes blurred. "He was discharged," she whispered. "Yeah," the vet grunted, "because he refused to lie. Higher-ups were smuggling narcotics through aid shipments. Miller found out, filed an anonymous report, but they traced it back. Gave him a choice, play dumb or disappear quietly." She sank onto a nearby stool. "And he chose silence?" The man nodded. "Said integrity's louder than medals." Vivian's voice cracked. "Why didn't he ever tell me?" He gave her a look so piercing it hurt. "Would you have listened? Back then?" Vivian drove back with shaking hands on the wheel and shame pressing against her ribs. She didn't stop at home. She went straight to the office, took the black folder from her safe, and walked to the 37th floor. Dale was mid-call, but she entered anyway. He raised an eyebrow. "Vivienne." She tossed the folder on his desk. "Get out." He blinked. "Excuse me?" "Out of the company. You have until tomorrow to sign your resignation and transfer your equity." He leaned back, smug returning. "On what grounds?" Vivian's eyes burned. "You forged documents to slander a war hero. You endangered a child's safety for political leverage. And worst of all," she stepped closer, "you insulted the intelligence of a woman who used to believe in you." He opened his mouth. She stopped him. "I've already contacted the SEC, the board, and legal. You're done." And for the first time, Dale Rowan had no comeback, only silence. That night, Vivian returned to the rooftop. Jordan was already there. She handed him the folder. "I should have known." He took it, but didn't look inside. "I knew this would happen," he said simply. "Why didn't you defend yourself?" He finally met her eyes. "Because if someone needs paperwork to believe in me, I'm already guilty in their heart." Vivienne sat beside him, quiet, small, real. "I didn't need papers," she said. "I just needed time." Jordan exhaled, the city lights flickering below like restless truths. And for once, the past didn't feel like a chain. It felt like a page turning. The afternoon sun poured through the classroom windows like honey. Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor, colored pencils scattered around her like fallen leaves. She was working on a new drawing, a tall man in uniform, holding the hand of a little girl beneath a night sky. Vivienne stood at the doorway, watching. She'd come to drop off books for the scholarship students, but something about Ellie's quiet concentration stopped her. "You always draw your father like that," Vivienne said softly. Ellie glanced up. "Like what?" "Like he's more than a dad." Ellie smiled and went back to shading stars into the dark. "Because he is." Vivienne stepped inside, lowered herself onto a child-sized chair, and folded her hands. "Ellie, do you know what your father used to do? Before all this?" Ellie paused. Then she said, in that clear, honest voice that always cut straight to the truth, "He told me never to say. But I think it's time you knew." Vivian leaned forward, heart tightening. Ellie reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled old file folder with stickers on it. Stars, eagles, a purple heart drawn in marker. "I found this last year," she said. "He didn't know I kept it. It's his Story. Vivian opened it slowly. Inside were photocopies. A service photo of Jordan. Clean-cut, solemn, eyes piercing with purpose. Below it, handwritten notes, redacted mission summaries, briefs stamped confidential, and a single newspaper clipping, yellowed with time. American operative saves, civilians in raid gone wrong. Declines. Comment. Requests discharge. Ellie pointed at the headline. He was a strategist, she explained. But not the kind that sits behind computers all day. He went out there. He cracked enemy codes. Got into systems no one else could. Helped evacuate families from places too dangerous to be real. Vivienne turned the page. He was part of something called Echo Corps. They didn't just protect bases. They protected people. Villages. Kids. Like me. Her voice trembled, but with pride. One day, his team got orders to stand down. There were innocent people in danger, but the brass didn't want the headlines. Dad refused. He got them out anyway. They tried to bury it. Said he disobeyed orders. But he didn't care. Ellie looked at Vivian now, not as a child, but as someone delivering a truth far larger than herself. He didn't lose his honor. He left so he could keep it. Vivienne felt her throat close. The weight of her own assumptions settled heavy in her chest. Every time she'd looked at Jordan and seen just a janitor. Every time she'd asked what he did, instead of who he was. Later that night, in her penthouse study, Vivian sat surrounded by monitors and files, each one a piece of the puzzle Jordan had so carefully hidden from the world. Through contacts in military intelligence and old connections in private defense, she followed the trail. Quiet commendations, unsigned contributions to encryption protocols now used in secure government systems, and a single letter from a retired general who simply wrote, "Jordan Miller saw what the rest of us refused to, and paid the price for telling the truth." She stared at that sentence for a long time, then closed her laptop, leaned back in her chair, and whispered to no one in particular. My God, he wasn't just protecting Ellie, he was protecting all of us. The next morning, she drove out to the community garden Jordan volunteered at on Saturdays. She found him there, kneeling in the soil, dirt on his forearms, hair pulled back, his daughter beside him planting seedlings like they were jewels. "Jordan," she said quietly. He looked up, shaded his eyes from the sun. Vivian didn't speak right away. She walked closer, knelt beside them, and handed him a worn piece of paper, the general's letter. He read it. Didn't react. She spoke, low. "I thought I was the one running a company that changed lives. But you've been building something far more lasting. Quietly. Without thanks." He folded the letter, placed it gently on the ground beside the basil plants. "I don't need thanks," he said. "I know," Vivian whispered, "but I owe you more than that." She turned to Ellie, who was beaming. "I think your father's story needs to be told." Ellie smiled wider. "Then tell it right. Not about battles, but about choices." Jordan met Vivian's eyes. "No headlines," he said. "No headlines," she agreed. He nodded once, and that was enough. That evening, Vivian sent out an internal company memo. No press releases, no ceremony. Just one message to every employee, from the top floor to the janitorial staff. To all team members, we're expanding the invisible perspective into a full educational and career-building pipeline. Not just scholarships, but leadership programs, mentorships, and skill development for the people who are often overlooked. The janitors, the cafeteria workers, the veterans rebuilding from silence, the people whose stories don't fit LinkedIn bios but shape the world in bigger ways. It will be led by a team of anonymous advisors, people who don't want praise, just progress. Because sometimes the greatest warriors wear no uniform, and the best leaders never raise their voices. Vivian Wren, CEO. Back at the garden, under a setting sun, Ellie drew another picture. This time, it was her father holding a lantern, lighting a path not for her, but for others behind her. A line of silhouetted figures following his light. She titled it, "The Warrior Who Never Asked to Be Seen." The boardroom at Beacon Tech was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that followed devastating truths, or preceded impossible hope. Vivian stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, hair pulled back, eyes sharper than ever. She'd called an emergency meeting with only one line in the subject. "We lost more than we thought." She placed a single folder on the table and opened it. "Last year," she began, "our core data architecture was breached. Not publicly. Internally." The room shifted. Murmurs. Eyes darted. Vivian held up a hand. $18 million in development losses. Vanished. A new competitor launched a system, eerily similar to our prototype. We couldn't trace it. Couldn't prove it. So we let it go. She looked around. I was wrong to bury it, and I was even more wrong to think the damage ended there. From the back of the room, Jordan stepped forward. No badge, no title, just calm gravity in the shape of a man. "I'd like access," he said, voice steady, "to the backups from the breach window. All server activity, uncompressed logs, full stack." A beat of silence. Then Vivian gave a single nod. Hour 1. Jordan sat alone in the server room, surrounded by towers of whirring machines. A cup of black coffee sat untouched. His fingers moved like a pianist's across 3 keyboards at once, eyes scanning streams of raw code. Hour 6. He found it. A ghost packet, something that shouldn't have existed. A line of syntax buried in an innocuous string. It wasn't just a data extraction. It was a replacement. Whoever breached Beacon Tech didn't just steal. They planted a corrupted version in the backup, something that would fail under pressure. Something dangerous. Hour 17. He mapped the trail backward, not just to Beacon Tech's servers, but to the rival company's current global rollout. He opened a test simulator, input the corrupted code, and watched as the system crashed, not gently, but with explosive implications. If deployed at scale, it could cause chain reactions across partner databases, financial systems, healthcare infrastructures, cloud dependencies. This wasn't industrial espionage. It was a ticking time bomb. At hour 36, Jordan stood again in the boardroom, dark circles under his eyes, a drive in his hand. He plugged it in. The room dimmed as a projection lit up. Lines of code, simulations, crash patterns, the whole anatomy of the breach. "This," he said, "is the ghost they left behind. Your competitor's product isn't just built on stolen code. It's built on broken code." Gasps. He continued, quiet and deliberate. "If they deploy this globally, it won't just hurt them. It will hurt everyone, every company that partners with them, every hospital that uses their platform, every citizen who logs into a public portal." Someone from legal leaned forward. "We need to file suit. Leak this to the press. Shut them down before they shut us down." But Jordan shook his head. "No," he said. "You don't win wars with fire. You win them with strategy." He turned to Vivian. "Don't sue. Don't expose them. Offer to help them fix it." Murmurs exploded. "They'll never accept." Jordan raised a hand. "They will, if we frame it right. If we let them save face, help them patch it, with conditions, new partnerships, co-branded frameworks, licensing, set the rules from the inside." Vivian stared at him, realization dawning. "You're not just salvaging what we lost," she whispered. "You're reshaping the future of this industry." He gave a soft smile. "I'm not saving a company. I'm securing a system that should have never been vulnerable to ego in the first place. 1 month later. A quiet press release. Beacon Tech announces joint initiative to strengthen cybersecurity across global tech platforms. No mention of lawsuits, no scandal, just innovation, cooperation, stability. Behind the scenes, Beacon Tech had become the standard bearer. Their patches became industry benchmarks. Their frameworks, once buried, now the spine of the digital infrastructure. Within 60 days, Beacon Tech's valuation doubled. By day 90, they became the most trusted tech entity on the market. They hadn't just recovered, they'd rewritten the rules of engagement. On the rooftop garden of Beacon Tech HQ, Vivian stood beside Jordan. The city sparkled below them, oblivious to the quiet war that had been diffused just beneath their feet. She handed him a letter. No signature, just a gold seal. "Offer from the Pentagon," she said. "They want you to consult. Full clearance, any salary you name." He looked at it, folded it once, and handed it back. "I have a job," he said. She smiled. "Still a janitor?" He smirked. "Still invisible." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Vivian said, "You saved us." He shook his head. "I gave you a mirror. You decided what to see in it." From below, Ellie's laughter rang out, chasing birds in the garden. Vivienne watched her, eyes soft. "She's going to change the world," Jordan nodded. She already did. A week later, Beacon Tech's internal newsletter featured a photo of Ellie holding a framed drawing, the same one she had made of the broken watch, now shaded in gold, titled, "Fixed, Together." And beneath it, in small italic letters, "The man who swept the floor, swept away the lies." The ballroom of the Conrad Center pulsed with anticipation. Banners lined the stage. "Invisible no more. National scholarship launch for children of veterans and essential workers." The event had been covered by every major outlet. Tech giants, policy leaders, educators, and in the middle of it all, Vivian Lang. She stood backstage, heels still, breath held. A woman who had once been feared for her steel spine now trembled not with nerves, but with the weight of redemption. The MC's voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the woman behind this unprecedented movement, Vivian Lang, CEO of Beacon Tech." Applause, warm, expectant, but not yet thunderous. Vivian stepped into the light. No teleprompter, no prepared speech, just a thin sheet of paper in her pocket, and a truth finally ready to breathe. "I wasn't always someone who saw clearly," she began, her voice steady but raw. "Years ago I built walls instead of bridges, measured worth by resumes, not by heart. I believed in merit, but I misunderstood where merit truly begins." The room quieted to a hush. Her gaze swept across the audience. Students, veterans, janitors, single parents, teachers, all watching. "Today, we launch a fund to support the children of veterans and invisible workers, the people this country forgets while standing on their shoulders." A murmur of agreement. Vivian took a breath. Her fingers trembled slightly. "But before we celebrate, I owe you the truth." She stepped away from the podium. "Years ago, a man walked into my company. He swept the floors, fixed the leaky sink, cleaned the conference glass before billion-dollar deals." She smiled painfully. "And I never really saw him." Her voice broke for the first time. "I fired him because I mistook quiet for weakness, because I couldn't imagine that someone with dust on their boots might be carrying more wisdom than the suits in the room." Gasps rippled, whispers. She raised her hand gently, silencing them. "What I didn't know was that the man I cast out was once a decorated strategist for our armed forces, that his little girl had the sharpest mind I'd ever meet, that when my company was at the edge of collapse, it was his mind and her innocence that saved it. Tears formed in the corners of several eyes. Vivian nodded slowly, deliberately. His name is Jordan Moore, and I stand here today because of the man I once dismissed. At that moment, the massive screens behind her lit up. Images of Jordan and Ellie flashed. A photo of Ellie drawing, Jordan beside her, smiling faintly. A janitor's cart in the background. Then the headlines: Ex-janitor saves, tech giant from collapse. Beacon Tech's new moral backbone. The crowd stirred, buzzing louder. Vivian continued, I'm not proud of who I was, but I am proud to stand here, having learned. Because sometimes, the most courageous act is admitting you were blind. She looked toward the side curtain. Jordan, would you join me? Silence descended again. Then, he stepped onto the stage. Simple khakis, rolled sleeves, the same quiet, measured gait. No flash, no bravado, just presence. And suddenly, the entire room rose to their feet. Thunderous applause erupted. Chairs pushed back. A standing ovation not for a CEO, not for a celebrity, but for a man who swept floors and rewrote fate. Some clapped slowly, reverently. Others shouted, whistled. A few cried. The witness effect had begun. Vivienne stepped aside. Jordan approached the podium, looked at the microphone, then stepped away from it entirely. He stood in front of the crowd. No barrier, no platform, just himself. And then he said simply, "Thank you for finally seeing." Nothing more. No speech, no victory lap. But it was enough. The crowd exploded again, not out of pity, but because truth, when spoken humbly, moves mountains. Later that evening, a different screen flickered to life in offices across the country. News segments dissected the moment. Commentators called it the beginning of a new corporate conscience. Analysts spoke about ethical leadership like it had just been rediscovered. And a clip went viral. Vivian placing her CEO pin on the podium and leaving it there while walking down to stand beside Jordan, not in front of him. In the days that followed, Dale Rowan, the board member who had tried to sabotage Jordan's reputation, was exposed. Leaked memos, edited security footage, malicious reports. Vivian wasted no time. An emergency board vote was called. Dale was removed. Publicly. He left the building with no farewell, no applause, just the echo of everything he'd tried to bury, now staring him in the face. The Invisible No More Fund reached $45 million in pledges within the first 72 hours. And on Beacon Tech's website, a new banner was added, a photo of Ellie holding hands with other children of veterans. The quote below read, "We were never broken, just waiting to be seen." The morning sun spilled over the newly constructed campus of Beacon Future Academy, gilding the edges of its glass atrium and casting a golden hue across the eager faces gathered on the central lawn. Rows of students sat in navy blazers, each embroidered with a stitched flame. Beacon Tech's symbol of knowledge and new beginnings. Parents, veterans, teachers, and reporters filled the outer seats. On stage stood dignitaries and executives, but the center of attention was not any of them. It was a small wooden step stool placed before a towering podium, and behind it, waiting in the wings, was Ellie Moore. 11 years old, brown curls tied in a ribbon, white blouse neatly tucked into a navy skirt. In her hands, creased and folded, the speech she wrote herself. Vivienne Lang sat in the front row, no longer the guarded CEO, but simply a listener. Her hands were clasped tight in her lap, a tissue already prepared. Next to her, Jordan remained still. His arm rested lightly on the chair beside him, where his daughter's backpack sat, as if saving a seat for who she used to be. The headmaster approached the mic. And now, the inaugural student of Beacon Future, the one whose voice started it all. Ellie Moore. Applause rose, not thunderous, not explosive, but warm, deep, like the world already knew it was about to witness something it wouldn't forget. Ellie walked onto the stage. She didn't stumble. She didn't look back. She stepped up onto the stool, took a breath, and looked out at the sea of faces. "Hi," she began, voice soft but clear. "I'm Ellie. I guess I'm supposed to say I'm honored to be here. But honestly, I didn't expect to be here at all." Laughter. Gentle, affectionate. She smiled briefly, then held up a small, folded drawing, a sketch of a clock. "Some of you might have seen this before. It's the first thing I ever drew at Beacon Tech, when I followed my dad to work and sat under his janitor cart." A pause. It wasn't just a clock. It was a question. I was trying to understand time. Why some people have more of it. Why some people's time doesn't seem to matter as much. The room stilled. "My dad once told me something," she continued. "Just because you're small doesn't mean your truth is." She looked up, directly at Vivian. I didn't understand what he meant back then, but now I do. Ellie folded the paper, then placed it in her pocket. Her tone shifted, not rehearsed, not performed, just real. "There was a time when no one listened to me, not because they were mean, just because they were used to looking somewhere else, at titles, degrees, shoes without scuff marks." A ripple of quiet laughter. "But when they started listening," she said slowly, "things began to change." She gestured around her. "This school, this whole idea, exists because people finally believed a janitor could have ideas, that his daughter could ask the right questions, that kindness and truth shouldn't depend on your job title or your shoes or your age." Vivian lowered her head, wiping her cheek with a trembling hand. Ellie continued. "Some people call us underdogs. I don't really know what that means. But I do know this. Every time someone said, 'You can't,' I got a little bit better at saying, 'Watch me.'" She paused, letting the moment land. Then, she did something no one expected. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a single silver key, a replica of her dad's janitor keychain. "I asked my dad if I could bring this today. It's the master key he used to carry. I thought it was magic when I was little. Turns out, I was right." She held it up for the crowd, because it opened doors no one else cared to walk through. Applause grew. Vivian cried openly now, her hands covering her mouth. "Jordan?" He didn't move, but his eyes softened, not with pride, with peace. Ellie's voice quieted to a whisper, amplified only by the strength of her presence. "People like my dad, people like the ones this school is built for, they don't ask for fame. They just want their truth to be heard." She folded the key gently into her hand and stepped down from the podium. No closing line, no bow, just a nod. The kind you give when you know the world is finally listening. The audience rose, not because the program said standing ovation, but because something shifted. Teachers cried, veterans saluted, reporters lowered their cameras just to feel it. The witness effect, reborn, this time through a child. Later that day, news headlines would read, "The girl who redefined merit." Ellie Moore's speech sparks national education reform talks, from janitor's daughter to policy architect. And on the steps of Beacon Future Academy, Jordan Moore would walk beside his daughter, saying nothing as cameras flashed. He didn't need to say anything, because the world had finally seen the truth. And it came in the voice of a child. 1 year later, the walls of Beacon Tech's newly renovated headquarters shimmered with soft earth tones and skylights that bathed the building in natural light. In the heart of the top-floor executive conference room, once a place of cold strategy and power plays, now hung a new centerpiece, a framed sketch of a clock. The drawing was simple, delicate pencil lines, carefully inked over with purpose. But what made the room pause wasn't the design. It was the handwritten words beneath. This was open once, but now it's safe. A single brass plaque sat below it. Artist, Ellie Moore, age 10. To its left was the freshly unveiled Beacon Tech logo, redesigned in brushed gold and soft gray. Underneath it, the new company motto, Integrity. Seen. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Vivian Lang stood quietly in front of the clock, a cup of black coffee cooling in her hand. She didn't speak. She simply looked. Once, this room had echoed with ambition and hierarchy. Today, it felt grounded. She turned as the conference door opened. A young janitor entered, pushing a cart. His eyes widened slightly as he noticed her, unsure whether to back away. Vivian smiled gently. "You don't have to rush," she said. "I'm just leaving." He nodded, relaxing only a little. She walked past him, pausing before the door. "By the way," she added, "thank you for keeping this place clean. We couldn't run it without you." His mouth opened, stunned. But she was already gone. Every month, without exception, Vivian now spent one full day walking the halls not as CEO, but as a guest. No bodyguards, no assistants, just a small notepad and a quiet curiosity. She visited janitorial closets, school cafeterias, maintenance tunnels, the shadows of her empire. She asked names, she shook hands, she listened. And when someone asked why the most powerful woman in the company took time to speak to those who had no LinkedIn profiles, no corner offices, her answer was always the same. Because when I didn't, I missed everything. At a small-town elementary school in rural Oregon, Ellie sat cross-legged under a sunlit tree during recess. She wasn't alone. A handful of younger students were gathered around her, each holding paper and pencils. "Now remember," she said patiently, "draw what you think matters, not what you think they want." A boy raised his hand. "Even if it's broken?" "Especially if it's broken," Ellie replied. "That's how you know it's real." One of the teachers watched from a distance, holding back tears. The girl who once drew to understand the world now helped others draw to heal it. That evening, back at home, Ellie sat at the dining table. Her father, Jordan, was preparing dinner, chopping vegetables with the same quiet precision he used when debugging encrypted military firewalls. "Dad," she called, "do you still have the old drawing? The very first clock?" He wiped his hands and retrieved a creased sheet of paper from a drawer. The pencil marks were faded, but the intent remained. She studied it for a moment, then pulled out her sketch pad. "I want to finish it," she whispered. This time, she added not just the missing hands, but also a soft arc of color behind them. Gentle shades of blue, the color of stillness. And beneath the clock face, she wrote in careful block letters. This was open once. But now, it's safe. Later that night, Jordan looked at the new drawing pinned to their fridge. He didn't say anything, but he placed his hand gently over the paper for a moment, as if to bless it, as if to remember. 2 weeks later, Beacon Tech hosted a quiet ceremony. Not for shareholders, not for cameras, just employees and their families. A janitor named Elena, who once cleaned server rooms at midnight, was awarded a full college scholarship for her daughter. A cafeteria worker, Mr. Whitaker, received company funding to launch a food truck, following a dream he'd buried decades ago. And at the end of the evening, as the room buzzed with quiet joy, Vivian stood on a small platform and read from a page, her voice low, steady, transformed. Justice isn't just about punishing what's wrong. It's about protecting what's right, even when it's silent, even when no one's watching. Outside, in the crisp night air, Jordan walked with Ellie under the soft halo of streetlights. They passed the Beacon Tech logo glowing on the side of the building. "You know," Ellie said, "it's weird." "What is?" "That everything changed, but you stayed the same." Jordan smiled. Not the same. Just more of who I've always been." She nodded, then slipped her hand into his. And in that final stillness, the kind that only comes after a storm, there was no applause, no grand curtain call. Just a girl who once drew clocks because she didn't understand time, now drawing legacies. And a father who once swept hallways, now quietly sweeping hearts. Where are you watching from today? We'd truly love to know, whether it's a small town, a quiet city corner, or somewhere in the countryside. Your presence here means more than you think. If this story touched something in your heart, consider subscribing, not just to follow more stories like this, but to be part of a space that believes in dignity, kindness, and second chances. Sometimes, all it takes is a story to remind us of what truly matters. Thank you for spending time with us. From our little corner of the internet to yours. Stay well, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next story.